It's good to be here. I appreciated very much the first song they sang, mostly because it applies to today's message, in that it was written in the 90s, as I can remember. It was an oldie for some of you. For some of us, we remember when it was written, so it's not really quite an oldie, but yeah. Today's message starts as the good old days. Remember the good old days. Now, for each of us, that means something different. For those of us who are older, maybe there's more of the good old days that we can remember than some of you who are younger. But I think for a lot of us, the good old days were like 2019, right? It was a different world in 2019, so we can look back to 2019 and say, remember we used to go to the restaurant, we had people over our house, we had parties, we could go anywhere we wanted to go without some kind of passport or anything. The churches were booming. 2019 was the good old days. Can you remember that? Now, in December of 2019, if someone said to you, in just a couple of years, the government's going to shut down your church. In a couple of years, you won't be allowed to visit each other in your homes. In a couple of years, you're going to need a government passport to go to Walmart, or they're not going to let you in the door. You would have said, you're crazy. That'll never happen. Can you imagine in Canada a protest involving 2.5 million people and 100,000 trucks? In Canada? Oh, we're sorry. It's like, that's not going to happen. That's like ridiculous. That will never happen. And yet here we are. Here we are. And all this has happened in the last couple of years. And for most of us, I think, we're kind of looking back and going, you remember 2019? That was a good year. The good old days. Well, we're going to pick up our reading this morning in Isaiah chapter 43. And the nation of Israel is in this exact same spot. They're reminiscing about the good old days, because what has happened to us in the last 2 years is nothing compared to what's happened to them. As this is being written, they're no longer home. It's like somebody has taken you out of Quebec, yoink, and put you in some foreign country somewhere else, and you're gone. And you're looking back and longing for Quebec, maybe not the cold mornings that we had this morning, but you're longing for Quebec, you're longing to go home, and yet you don't see any way of going home. And this is where these people are, and they're reminiscing the good old days a little bit. And the good old days are good old days. And good old days are a little bit of perspective, depending on yourself and the political situation. But yeah, so we're gonna pick up here in Isaiah chapter 43. And we're going to read for a little bit, and we're going to talk. It's going to talk about their position, and they've been captured by Babylon, and then they're going to reminisce a little bit. So we'll start reading here, and we'll start reading in verse 14. This is what the Lord says: your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel, for your sake I will send to Babylon, that's where they're living now, and bring down as fugitives all the Babylonians and the ships in which they took pride. I am the Lord, your Holy One, Israel's Creator, your King. This is what the Lord says: He who made a way through the sea, a path through the mighty waters, who drew out the chariots and horses, the army and reinforcements together, and there they lay, never to rise again, extinguished, snuffed out like a wick. We'll stop there. Okay, these are the good old days. He's referring here to when the nation of Israel left Egypt and crossed the Red Sea. Now, when you look through the Old Testament, there's a lot of really cool things that happen there, but probably at least in the top 3 of really cool things that happen there is the nation of Israel leaving Egypt, ending at the Red Sea, then God splitting the sea open, and they cross through the Red Sea as a nation, 1 million+ people. And then the biggest superpower on planet Earth chases them into the Red Sea, and God wipes them out. So they are nothing. And you who were a slave are sitting on the other side of the Red Sea looking back over the waste of the huge army that was pursuing you, and you're free. That's got to be one of the big ones. And so God refers back to this one because they go, remember the days when God did that? Wow, that was something. And maybe in your life you have an event or something where you look back and go, do you remember the days that God did that? That was so cool. And it was cool. It really was. But let's read the next verse. Forget the formal things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the desert and streams in the wasteland. The wild animals honor me, and the jackals and the owls, because I provide water in the desert and streams in the wasteland to give drink to my people, my chosen. Anyway, we're not going to read on because it's not particularly applicable, but what's happening here is God saying, you're a captive in Babylon. You're a prisoner, but you're going home. I'm going to do something new, and there's a huge desert between you and home. And you're going to cross that desert, and you're all going back home again. I'm doing something new. This is going to be bigger than crossing the Red Sea. I'm doing something new. Hang on, nation of Israel. It's coming your way. And so kind of my thoughts here this morning, particularly for Hope Community Church and basically for all churches, is we're in a situation where we're almost like captives in a desert or a foreign place. There's nobody here this morning other than the tech crew. And so it's like, what's this all about? How are we going to get back home? How are we going to get back? But God says, don't worry about it. I'm doing something new. At camp, 2019 was a great year. In 2020, we were setting up to have a record year. And all of a sudden, it stopped. And stopped, and it stopped. And every time we thought it would go, we'd stop and stop and stop. And just this past year, last October, Mike took over as a general manager of camp. And so, we did a little bit of activity in October, then everything shut down again. So do your financial planning for the next year. What's that going to look like? Who knows? We're in this really strange environment. But God is doing something new. Do not reminisce on 2019 or whatever the really cool thing was before that God did, and he did some cool things. And 2019 may have been a great year for you. But from where we are now, God is doing something new. He's doing something new in your church. This is new, an empty church. Okay? This is new, a new technology. Hudson is heading out. Hudson is about to experience something new. I don't know if he knows what it is yet, but something new is coming. With your church, God is doing something new. The experiences that we're going through now are going to change the world moving forward. It's going to be different. It's going to be new. So, in Isaiah, God says, in verse 18, forget the formal things. Don't dwell on the past. Dwelling on the past can kind of tie us up moving forward into the future. So yeah, there's good things, but let's not keep going back to the past. It's comfortable. It's reassuring, the past. But God says, don't dwell. Let's not continue going into the past because I'm doing a new thing in verse 19. Brand spanking new. This church is remarkable. I've watched the church over 25 years, from when it was Huntingville Church up here in the corner, and now you're in this beautiful building here. This church has been a really good example of stepping out in faith and trying something new, trying something different, working hard to reach a community. You really have been a fantastic example to the rest of the churches and a community of how a church can work hard to impact the community. So my hat's off to you and congratulations for doing that. And things will continue to change and they'll continue to progress as we go along. So like the nation of Israel crossed the Red Sea, you've done a lot of things here. What is going to happen in the future? I don't know. I don't know what the future is going to look like for you. I don't know what the future is going to look like for camp. But I do know that God's going to do some new stuff. Now, I can talk about camp for just a minute, because God has done in the last 2 years some really cool things that we probably never would imagine he would have done. At camp, we started some equine therapy. We started playing with that, where we take some handicap, that's not politically correct word anymore, but some people with challenges, shall we say, adults and children, and they would come to camp, and we would help them using the horses. Well, this has turned out to be a thing. And the CLSC and the government are sending us people, and foundations are sending us people to be ministered to. This is something new. This is really exciting. We just got a call, and Mike took a booking for the CLSC, has called us for help with families in crisis. They want us to help them put together some events to help them as they minister to these families. So a government agency, and fairly far up in a government agency, has reached out to us for help in the community, a Christian organization. Go figure. That's something new. That's something remarkable. That's really cool. We've been a residential camp forever, and our hearts keep going back there. Last year we couldn't do that, so we did day camp. God blew our socks off last year. I mean, we had such an amazing summer last year. So many kids got saved, and we reached so many kids up and down our street. It was amazing. In my 25-ish years at camp, for me, it was the most exciting summer ever, because we had our neighbors piling into our place, and we're sharing the gospel with them in the driveway and all. It was an amazing summer. That's never happened before. That was something new. He's given us a much more local focus at our camp. When we moved here 25 years ago, it was an English camp. It was an English neighborhood, English community. It's all French now. And through that, though, God has brought a couple of the French local churches to step up a bit and become involved with us in evangelism and reaching that. So that was really cool. That's something new. He's got us involved in the criminal justice system, where we're taking kids, from the criminal system. They send them to us. They do their time with us, and we bless them and teach them and their local kids, and we run into the kids' parents at Rona. How about that? And stages. We have kids coming from the local English high school, the local French high school, I should say, to do a stage with us, to learn about how to work and stuff. And so we get to play into all these people's life. This is all new stuff that God is doing that is so exciting. Don't look back. Don't look back. God's doing something new. So that's kind of just what he's doing at camp. He's doing stuff in our personal lives that are new. He's doing stuff in your church that is new. He's doing stuff in our camp that is new. It's a lot of fun. So, let's read on here. I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Did ever any of you have one of those jack-in-the-box things where you turn the crank? It springs out. Maybe it surprises you. It's the first time you've seen it. It springs up. God is doing something that we don't expect. God always does something that we don't expect. He is so far. We're going to wrap up in Ephesians a little bit later. But he does stuff that is so new that we don't expect it and that we don't really see it coming at all. We certainly didn't see this coming. He's doing stuff that is new that we don't even see coming yet. And so the last phrase, do you not perceive it? Do you not perceive what God is doing? There's a couple of things I've learned, and we're going to go to the book of Job here real quick. Job chapter 33. And I think it's Elihu, however you pronounce his name. One of Job's friends is speaking to him, and Job's friends had really bad timing in their advice. They're doing great for the first week when they came to visit. Then they started talking, and things went south from there. But not everything that they said was particularly wrong or incorrect. So in Job chapter 33, in verse 14, well, actually, we'll back up to verse 12. But I tell you, in this you are not right, for God is greater than man. Why do you complain to him that he answers none of your words? For God does speak, now one way, now another. Though man may not perceive it, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on men as they slumber in their beds, he may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings. What he's saying here is God does all kinds of different things. And seldom, at least in my experience, seldom does he do the same thing twice. Each of us, God has a unique, specific plan for your life. It is unique from everybody else. Your walk of faith is between you and God. It is totally custom-made for you. You can't say, I want to be like this person, because you're not that person. God has something for that person, and he has something for you. It's a unique walk of faith. So we have to be careful in ourselves not to compare ourselves to others and not to think about others in comparison to me, because each of us is unique. God doesn't do the same thing twice the same way, at least in my experience. So God is doing something new and it's different, and it's talking about that here. You know, he treats everybody different. He approaches everybody different. And so as we look to the future, we can expect that God is not probably going to repeat what he has done in the past. So let's not look to the past to judge to see what God is going to do. It's not going to be like that. It's never going to be like 2019 again. It's not going to be like that. He's doing something different. It's going to be great. We may not know what it is yet, but it's going to be great, and it's going to be a different way. So we need to have, as a church, as an individual, our minds open to accept change, because things are probably going to be different moving forward. You know, we can resist God in a lot of different ways. Safety and security are one of the ways we resist God. Because, you know, the way it used to be was very predictable. It was very nice, and I like that. Moving out of that into something new is uncomfortable. And so I may resist that change that God is going to do, because I'm going to miss the security that we used to have. Don't let that hold you back. Don't let your old securities, the things that used to make you feel safe, hold you back or resist God from moving forward into the future. Job chapter 9. Verse 5. I didn't bookmark this. You have to give me a second to get there. For all you people with the electronics, you're probably already there. Job chapter 9, verse 5. He moves mountains without their knowing it, and overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth from its place and makes pillars tremble. He speaks to the sun, and it does not shine. He seals off the light of the stars. He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waters of the sea. He is the maker of the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades and the constellations of the south. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. When he passes me, I cannot see him. When he goes by, I cannot perceive him. Job's talking here, and it kind of ties into the last part of this verse where he says, do you not perceive it? I am doing something new. Do you not perceive it? And Job is saying here, God does all of these amazing things. And yet from his position where he is in, he's suffering a lot right now. He doesn't perceive God's presence. He doesn't perceive God listening. He doesn't perceive God do anything. Is God doing something? Absolutely. But Job is not able to perceive it. And so the challenge in Isaiah 43 is, do you not perceive what I am doing? As humans, we're really bad at perceiving things. So, I'll give you an example. You're sitting at home right now on your sofa, maybe in your pajamas, maybe you have a cup of coffee, and you're all comfortable in your sofa, you're feeling very secure. Do you realize, as you're sitting on your sofa, that you were spinning on a big ball at 2,000 miles an hour? And that if it were to suddenly stop, you would go splat against your wall? Do you perceive that while you're sitting in your sofa on this spinning ball is rotating around the sun at a crazy high rate of speed? Do you perceive that while you're on your spinning ball in your sofa, spinning, going around the sun, that your sun and the rest of the solar system is part of this giant thing called the Milky Way, and it's rotating like crazy around the core at wicked high speeds? Do you perceive that that galaxy that all this stuff is in is zipping through the universe? You're traveling over 100,000 miles an hour right now as you sit in your sofa. Do we perceive that? No. Is it happening? Yes. We as humans actually perceive very, very little. We perceive very little in the world that's around us. Now, we're sitting here this morning, and there's cell phone waves going through us, and radio waves, and all kinds of other stuff zipping right through us. We have no idea about that. We don't feel that. We don't perceive that. When you're excuse me, sitting on your sofa at home there, do you perceive, I don't want to gross you out, but there's probably little like microscopic creatures crawling around on your sofa next to you? There's a whole world that's way smaller than us that exists that, without microscopes and stuff, we don't even see it. There is so much happening around us, and we perceive just an itty bitty bit of it. We see light and we see the world around us, and we perceive vision. Well, on the energy scale, that light band's about this big, on a scale about this big of stuff that we don't perceive. We have the infrared going down below us. That was special vision. We can kind of play with the infrared. Then you move to the ultraviolet, and it keeps going from there. We perceive a very small amount. And I'm afraid the same thing is true spiritually. That we perceive a very small amount of what God is doing. It's so cool working at camp that God does something over here and does something with a person over here that we had no idea that at the exact same time he was doing something with the person over here who was connected to the person that's over here. So, we have a criminal justice kid come, and he's doing time at camp. And, he's gotten into trouble, and so we're working with him. So I walk into Rona to get some stuff, and there's a lady who's behind a counter who I've gotten to know over the years, and she says, "Oh, you've met my son." I'm going, "I've met your son." And she gives me something. I said, that's your son? So it's the lady I know at Rona's son who's doing a time at Parkside, who is having an amazing time at Parkside and wants to keep coming back. And now I have an open door to talk again to the lady behind the counter because it was her son that came to Parkside. God does this all the time. We tend to work in a very flat kind of a zone where we think we're doing something spiritually right here, right now, and this is what's happening. But God's doing stuff all over the place, all at the same time. And the impact we have on this person right here is going to affect all kinds of people all over the place. God is very busy. Our problem is we don't perceive it. We're so tied up in the little thing that we're doing right in front of us. And I will confess, I am a guy. Worse yet, I'm an engineer. And so like if I'm building something here, and Pat can attest to this, if I'm doing something here, the house could be on fire, there's an earthquake going on, and all kinds of stuff is happening, but I'm doing my thing right here, and I don't perceive any of it happening because I'm doing my thing right here. We get like that as Christians in our spiritual walk, in our churches, where we get so tied up into the little thing that we're doing right here that we miss all the things that God is doing. And he is very busy. Scripture says he's at work all the time. Jesus says, my Father is at work all the time. At nighttime, at daytime. He's always busy doing his work. And we need to open our eyes and look and see what God is doing. As a church, we need to open our eyes and look and see what God is doing. As a person, I need to open my eyes and look and see what God is doing. Now, I'm going to say something very unpopular here, particularly with the current generation and things that are going on, is that the world, and probably most of you are plugged in, almost all the time. There's always music. I love music. There's always Facebook. There's always something going on. And we are now more than ever bombarded with information. All kinds of information. And that just is pouring at us like a fire hose. And in those conditions, it's very hard to perceive what God is doing. You need some quiet time in your life to stop and perceive what God is doing. Sometimes in the car, shut off the radio and just think and ask God, show me what you're doing. Sometime in your quiet time, ask God to show you what he's doing so that we can start to perceive what he's up to. There's a really cool story in 2 Kings that illustrates this. And maybe you know this, 2 Kings chapter 6. And where are we here? Need these glasses. That's one of the joys of getting old. 2 Kings chapter 6, we'll start at verse 13. The came up in Aram or Damascus was a little upset that Elisha was warning the king of Israel as to all his military intentions. So he says, go find out where he is. This is the king up in Damascus area talking to his generals. Go find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men to capture him. The report came back, he is in Dothan. Then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there, and they went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh, my Lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, O Lord, open his eyes so that he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots and fire all around Elisha. See, the servant of Elisha got up and walked out the door, probably to get some firewood or something to get breakfast going, and they're surrounded. From a worldly perspective, we're all in big trouble because they've come for us. And the phrase I love here, what are we going to do? Oh no, what are we going to do? The government closed our churches. Oh no, what are we going to do? Here we are. And there's always the human of, what are we going to do? And Elisha prays, open his eyes. Open the servant's eyes so that he can see. Because he's not perceiving reality. He sees this thing, he sees an army. And that's his perception, that's all he sees. But that's not reality. So God opens his eyes and he sees the mountains full of angels with chariots on fire, burning around Elisha. That's reality. all of a sudden there's a little army. It's like, sorry guys, but in the real world, you don't mean much. No, perspective. And oftentimes we run into things like where we are right now. And we go, oh no, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Open your eyes. I put myself in Hudson's shoes. I don't know if he's listening or not. But it's like, what am I going to do? You know, what I've done for the last few years is over. Moving to something new. What am I going to do? As a church, what are we going to do? There's nobody here. What are we going to do? I pray that God opens our eyes to see what he's going to do. He's going to do amazing things. And we're about out of time, but I just want to close with Ephesians chapter 3. We won't even go there. Verse 17 through 19. Paul's praying for the Ephesians that they would perceive God, that they would understand God and how big his love is and how big he is. He's praying for their perception to understand God. And then finally he says, God, who can do so much more than we can ever imagine or think about. God is about to do things bigger than we can imagine or think about. We need to trust him during this time of, oh no, what are we going to do? God is doing amazing things. God is going to do amazing things. They're not going to be like the old days. They're going to be better because God is doing something new. I think our music group is here. Thank you. It's been a privilege to be here this morning.